Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now back up. Verse 21. Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothed them. Because of Adam and Eve's sin, we remember at first they sewed fig leaves together. Because that's the way they thought they would fix it. But if you know anything about leaves, eventually they dry up. And you got to get more leaves. God said, no, he made them coats of skins. But guess what? To do that, something had to die. Those skins had to come off of something that was living. Some years ago, Brother Glenn had some calves when I was growing up. I was into agriculture and 4-H and all those things. I was raising some calves, I should say. I had about 5 of them. And I had them down the road in a pen. The lady let me use her place. She had about 3 acres. It was safe. It wasn't far from the house. I could go down and feed them. And I started them out on bottles, just little old bitty things. And I mean, when I'd come, they'd be awaiting for me. And I'd hold their bottle through the fence and I'd feed each one. I'd make sure they have water. I made sure the grass was just right. I took care of them because they were mine. You with me? They were mine. I had to take care of them. Well, one day I would go every day, and one afternoon in particular I went and I started counting my calves. I had 5 at the time and only 4 came up. And I go, something must be wrong. Now, this calf I'm talking to you about in particular kind of had a wild streak in her. Even from a little one, she was always different than the others. She'd stand back more. She was more skittish. She was just kind of, just wouldn't cooperate. She didn't like to obey. She was kind of a rebel, is what she was. This particular day when I got there, I didn't see her. So I hopped the fence and I went calling for her and looking for her. When I got to the very back of the field, I saw her. But she wasn't in the fence. She was on the other side of the fence. So I ran back to the truck and I got some feed and I tried to coax her in. She wouldn't come. I tried to get around her to try to hem her to see if she could get back in wherever she had gotten out at. I couldn't figure out where she got out. She was pretty slick. Couldn't find where she got out. So I went back to the house and called a couple of my friends and I said, I need some help. I said, one of my calves is out. I said, I got to get them back in. And we were on a major thoroughfare there coming right through Natal, Benny, Louisiana, where I was growing up. And I said, I got to get her back in. And had a couple of guys come and we devised our plan, how we'd get around them and do what we were going to do. And as we got around her, she bolted and she got by us and she got out on the highway and she started heading towards Baton Rouge on Highway 1064. We tried everything we could. From the Albany to the interstate where I-55 runs north and south is about 2 miles. the last time I saw her alive, she was jumping the fence at the overpass of where I-55 comes under Highway 1064. She jumped that fence and down the side she went. I saw her running right down beside the interstate, headed to Chicago, Illinois. That's where she is headed. Well, I panicked. And I started calling everybody. I called the agriculture department. They have one of them guns that will shoot them and put them to sleep, dark gun thing. And when I called them, they had a bull out in Freeport, and somehow somebody took the gun up there and there wasn't one down here. So I called one of my friends who's an excellent roper, Jim Jenkins, and I said, Jim, here's what's happened. And I said, the last I saw her, she's running up I-55. Now, as I watched her, as she ran on up, she began to drift off into the grass. And as you know, there's some trees usually, and then there's a fence. So I knew she was somewhere between the Natalbany overpass and the Tickfall overpass, which is the next overpass. There's not an exit there. So Jim said, I'll come. He said, give me time to get my horse together, load it in the trailer, and I'll get up there. I said, okay. About an hour and a half later, he came. Now, I had not seen her again, but as far as I knew, she had not moved. So Jim, he comes up the interstate. I meet him. I go down the embankment there. And he's got his rope. But he also brought his 30-30. Because he and I had both agreed, and I had told him, if he misses her with the rope and she got on the interstate and someone got killed, we'd never forgive ourselves, number one. Number two, I'd be held liable. She was mine. It's hard to see it on this skin, but right back here in the back, there's a brand. If you'll take the letter G, like this, and then come straight down off that G and make it a T. That was my brand, the Glenn Taylor brand that's registered with the state of Louisiana. She was mine, and she wore a brand to prove it, which made me responsible for her. I told Jim, I said, Jim, whatever you have to do the safest thing. I watched him as he rode down. I saw him stop, and I saw him stand up in his stirrups. And he pointed, she's over there. He come riding back to me, and he said, she's in a lot of brush. He said, I can't rope her in there. He said, the only way I can rope her, I got to get her out. And he said, to get her out, if I miss her, he said, she's going to run out on that interstate. Now, we didn't have time to call and stop all the traffic, because when she saw him, she stood up. And he was afraid she was going to run again. And he said, Glenn, he said, the only thing I know we can do is I got to shoot her. He said, is that all right with you? I said, man, do what you got to do. She was mine. He asked my permission. I gave him the okay. Kill her if you have to. I watched him as he rode back down. He stood up in his stirrups and he pulled his 30-30 out. And with one shot, she was dead. There's a bullet hole in this hide where he shot her. Now you say, Brother Glenn, what's the story? What's the reason for this illustration? Well, just like Adam and Eve, sins cause skins. I want to put you to put yourself in as this calf. Let me tell you why. At home, here, at school, where you go, you have been placed in an environment to protect you. This calf was in a fenced-off area that as long as she stayed in it, everything she wanted was brought to her. Everything she needed was brought to her. All she had to do was accept where she was and do right. Not try to get outside. Stay in. That's where it was safest. You see, we got some coyotes that hang out where they were. I had chicken wire fencing to keep them out. The lady next door had a dog to help keep the coyotes away. As long as they were in the pen, they were safe. But if they got outside the pen, they ran the risk of getting eaten. Because they were mine and I was responsible, I did everything I could to protect them. That's what your parents are trying to do. That's what your teachers are trying to do. That's what we here at GSA are trying to do. The rules we have are to protect you. I would much rather you be able to say, go home and tell your parents, how was it? Well, I learned a lot, but other than that, it was very uneventful. Then you go back home and say, well, this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened. Hey, we'd rather you say it was kind of dull as far as everything outside the music. That's a good thing. You see, when I purchased this calf, she became mine. When I put that brand on her, she made it visible to other people that she was mine. When you got saved, you see, when Jesus died on the cross of Calvary, He purchased you. He purchased you. And when you got saved and accepted what He had done, you got branded as a Christian. You were His. Are you with me? It's in too deep. Y'all better see the analogy here. You were His. And because of that, He's responsible for you. I told a story of a man in our church who was murdered 2 years ago. Him and another fellow who had been attending our church. He was a Christian fellow. I know he was. But he got off. And I knew the Lord wasn't going to allow him to keep living in the sin he was living in. Because to be truly saved, God couldn't allow it. And God called him home. I know that without a doubt. I couldn't risk what this calf could have done to me. See, this calf could have hurt my testimony. This calf could have hurt my cause, hurt what I was trying to do. And it could have also hurt other people too. Had she bolted across that interstate at the right moment, and there had been a number of cars, there's no telling how many people could have been hurt or killed. So I had to make the decision to take her out. That's what I had to do. Now, she would have been worth a whole lot more money to me had she have grown up and done right. She could have been a greater blessing to me. She could have had calves herself. She could have built the herd. No, she had to be a rebel. And I couldn't allow it. I had to put a stop to it and what she was doing. Let me ask you this morning, where are you at?